Calvary.
Trying to silence the doubters. The Pentagon shows off video of U.S. attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities, seeking aid from a controversial U.S.-backed contractor. At the same time, the World Health Organization says it's been able to send medical aid into the enclave for the first time since March. And it was meant to help make the world a better place. But as the UN marks 80 years since the creation of its charter, we look back at its missions and ask whether it still works, and is there a better way for the world? The U.S. Defense Secretary is insisting attacks on Iran's nuclear program have done severe after days of questions about just how effective the attacks had really been.
This report acknowledges it's likely severe damage. Again, this is preliminary, but leaked because someone had an agenda to try to muddy the waters and make it look like this historic strike wasn't successful. And the reality is, you want to call it destroyed, you want to call it defeated, you want to call it obliterated, choose your word. This was an historically successful attack, and we should celebrate it as Americans, and it gives us a chance to have peace, chance to have a deal, and an opportunity to prevent a nuclear Iran, which is something President Trump talked about for 20 years, and no other presidents had the courage to actually do.
Over Israel during their 12-day war, Iran.
The U.S. president, in his explaining of what happened, knew that under the appearance there was another truth, which means they couldn't do anything, they couldn't gain their goals.
Now, on Wednesday, U.S. President Donald Trump said there would be talks with Iran next week aimed at curbing its nuclear ambitions. Trump said he's confident Iran will pursue a diplomatic path towards reconciliation. Despite the 12 days of intense airstrikes and missile
We're going to talk to them next week with Iran. We may sign an agreement. I don't know. To me, I don't think it's that necessary. Since then, we've collected additional intelligence. We've also spoken to people who have seen the site, and the site is obliterated. And we think everything nuclear is down there. They didn't take it out.
Our correspondents are close to Iran, and Ilyas Afji is in Tel Aviv. But, John, we're going to start with you. And when it comes to that briefing, there seems to be two parts. One is defending it, and the second, a comprehensive breakdown from General Kane on how those strikes were conducted, which is not something we usually hear in such great detail from someone like him.
Yes, absolutely correct. Well, let's start with the description of what actually happened with Pete Hegseth. Clearly very sensitive about this issue. The Trump administration furious that this early leak of intelligence report, an early assessment of the damage, had said that, look, that is just an early assessment, it's not the final answer. And Hegseth today, quoting the Israeli military, Iranian nuclear project has been dismantled and will not be operable for several years at least, something backed up by the CIA director as well. But it's clear after the true battle has ended that the PR battle is very much underway, a battle that the Trump administration sees as being with parts of the American media, which they claim have an agenda. Now, then going on to more detail about this operation, we heard from General Kane that this actually began back in 2009 when American intelligence picked up that the Iranians were doing something at this mountain in Fordo, that they were constructing a site there. And the two agency operatives were tasked with finding out what was going on and countering it. Hence the long development towards these so-called bunker-busting bombs, which were dropped at the weekend over that site. An incredible operation, it would seem, more than 15 years in the making.
John, has there been any change among Americans regarding Trump's strikes on Iran? Because after such a briefing, there has to be something to be said for pride in the American military amongst ordinary Americans, some of whom were not keen on these strikes at all, thinking that this would lead America into a long-standing war with Iran.
The American public did not want to this news conference night, not knowing if they were tears and tears, as he described it. So very keen to get that pride in the operation across to the American public. And I think really degraded, but there is a threat, obviously, from Iranian-sponsored terror that if there was an incident such as that, for now, the Trump administration is hoping that, yes, this pride in this American mission will reinforce some support for
Tehran, where we can speak to Reza Hatami. And Reza, contrary to what we're hearing from the Americans, Iran's supreme leader sent a message to the country and to the world really very earlier on, and it was defiant, declaring Iran was the real winner in all of this.
Yes, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, paints a completely different picture of the war. As you said, the message was defiant. He said that Iran will not surrender, adding that it will be absurd for the United States to call on Iran to surrender, adding that Iran will not surrender to any country. He also declared victory over not only Israel, but also the United States, and downplayed U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities. He said that Israel has nearly collapsed under Iranian. If they don't intervene directly, then Israel will be destroyed completely. And that's why they intervene directly, adding that Iran delivered he said at the same time, they are downplaying Iran's response. But it's noteworthy to pay attention to what he didn't say in his speech. I mean, reading between the lines, he didn't say anything about the ceasefire, and he didn't say anything about diplomacy with the United States. We know that on Tuesday, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian had said that Iran is open to diplomacy with Washington. So probably we are going to...
So open to diplomacy, those facilities that have been the extent of that damage, while the IAEA has said they haven't had any formal communication with the Iranian.
With the IAEA, this is according to a bill approved into law today. The parliament approved the bill to suspend cooperation with the IAEA, and a vetting body, the Guardian Council, ratified the parliament's bill, and now it is with the IAEA, but that suspension hasn't happened yet. In terms of Iranian assessment, well, we had this general statement by Iran's highest authority. The damage has been minimal, so we don't expect any other Iranian official to contradict the comments by the supreme leader. But we did have a damage assessment by the IAEA today. Rafael Grossi said that these three locations, Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordo, have been severely damaged. He said that centrifuges in Fordo are not operational anymore. However, he said that we cannot say that Iran's nuclear program has been destroyed, adding that if someone says Iran's nuclear program has... Iran is very angry at the IAEA. I mean, Grossi wants to travel to Iran. He has said it several times since this war started, but it's not likely that Iran allows Grossi into the country. Iran is angry about Grossi's reports. They say that they are one-sided. They say they're politically motivated. Iran says after 20 years of cooperation with the IAEA, now we are seeing an attack on its nuclear facilities, an attack that the IAEA Board of Governors didn't even condemn it. So Iran believes that it has no choice but to suspend cooperation with the IAEA. But Grossi said that that suspension could create another crisis because the Board of Governors visited on only one day before Israel attacked Iran. That was on June the 12th. And Iran blames the IAEA for all this.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Reza Hatami in Tehran, thank you. And we can now speak to our Ilyas Afji in Tel Aviv. And Ilyas, when this war first started in those early days, we heard reports from the Israelis and the United States saying that they knew Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, has actually spoken to the country's Channel 13 station, and he's saying that Israel had plans to actually assassinate the leader. What do we know about this?
Recap, on the 6th day of the war, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz himself said that a new goal of this war is to kill Ayatollah Khamenei. And on this interview with, on Channel 13, he said that if he had been in our side, we would have taken him out. But let's remember also what President Donald Trump said on the fourth day of the war. He said that Ayatollah Khamenei is a very easy target. We know where he is. We can kill him anytime. But apparently, as Israel Katz said, they did not have him on their side, and they basically lacked what they needed to take him out. And also, they said that all objectives of the war have been accomplished, but we can see that he is alive and well. And
in Tel Aviv for us. Now, for analysis on all of this, we can speak to William Lawrence, a professor of political science and international affairs at the American University and a former senior diplomat. He's joining us from Uzbekistan's capital, Tashkent. Professor, as always, thanks so much for speaking to us. So we've heard of it came out a day after those strikes on Iran, very preliminary, very early on. But Trump has also severely criticized the media for reporting on this. Do you believe any of that criticism is warranted?
To extent of the damage to the Iranian nuclear program. So this is a battle over narratives. It's a battle over spin. And it is true some congressperson put that information out, but the information they put out wasn't classified. It was simply saying that from a preliminary perspective, it looks like a lot of damage was done, but it's very hard to assess, what it did to the Iranian nuclear program. And that raises a whole host of other questions, including that you can build a building, and there's lots of nuclear scientists that can do things in that building. So in that sense, the nuclear program of Iran not only hasn't been stopped, but it can't be stopped from that perspective. And that's something that's really rubbing the Trump administration the wrong way, because they wanted a quick win and a narrative of dominance over Iran, and then a forced peace, a sort of capitulation. And anything that goes against that coming from the media really, really rubs them the wrong way, because in addition to this war on Iran, there's a kind of war on media in the United States.
Does all of this rhetoric from Donald Trump, from his defense secretary, just further fuel Iran's nuclear ambition? We don't know the extent of the damage on their facilities, and now if they aren't allowing the UN's nuclear watchdog to have a look at them, Iran could simply be, well, this is just a restart, or we continue where we left off, because the last 12 days Iran may just be saying, well, we will just continue.
1000%. I mean, that's what Israel to weaponize their uranium stockpiles and turn them into a nuclear bomb. And that's really, really unfortunate. But there's another aspect that's not being talked about enough that's at play here, which is that the IAEA report about previous, let's say, lack of good practices by Iran on reporting on its nuclear enrichment program was going to lead to the imposition of sanctions on Iran related to that, because don't forget, there are still a number of European countries and Russia with Iran under what's left of the JCPOA. And those so-called snapback sanctions were going to come in probably by July or August. And so Iran was going to have another incentive to sort of back itself out of the JCPOA and move towards weaponization. And what Trump did was sort of, as the Saudis and others keep telling us, we'll start a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. One thing that I find really disingenuous is all the people saying, if other countries can have nuclear weapons, why can't Iran? And that's just against the whole idea of nuclear non-proliferation, because it's about what the number is now, 15 countries or so that have nuclear weapons. If 193 countries have nuclear weapons, we're doomed. And so those with nuclear stockpiles should be reducing them, and those that don't have the weapons shouldn't get them. That does not justify the U.S. bombing Iran, but it does which can, when he...
Debate in D.C. right now about Trump not getting that approval first from Congress before actually striking Iran, but then many...
So this has been a problem going on since World War II, that Congress has the power to declare war and never grabs that power. And so what has been happening is, since Instead, for the last 80 years or so, is presidents do things and then Congress either retroactively criticize it or retroactively give them the war powers. And then there's these, you can go after anyone you call a terrorist, basically. And so Trump is right that Obama and Bush violated that. But he's wrong in another sense, which is that Obama and Bush should not have violated it, and Congress should step up and take back its war power. They are the leading part under the Constitution. They're Article 1. They're supposed to tell Trump you can't do this, and should have told Obama and Bush they couldn't do it.
I'll have to leave it there. Professor William Lawrence, always great to get your take. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
My pleasure.
As a relative sense of calm settles between Iran and the US, more Iranians are returning home from Turkey. Our correspondent Yunus Demirol reports from the Kapaköy border crossing in Turkey's eastern Van province.
Sanki bazı konuştuğum insanlar çok memnun değiller durumdan.
Memnundur.
Memnunlar mı?
Memnundur tabii.
Durum orada şu an iyi diyorsun.
iyi.
So, again, he's telling us that the situation there is nice. I think his body language actually says something different. But he's saying that there are a lot of people who are trying to come to Turkey from Iran. He doesn't know why. That's what he said. He says he simply does not know why people are going. But from what I understand from a lot of the people that we've been talking to is because they're simply not satisfied with the situation, that there is a lot of insecurity, whether it be in terms of economy or, of course, security as well. And even though the ceasefire has taken effect right now, they don't know what the situation will be like in the future.
The result of the war, in my opinion, is not important. Not at all.
Yeah.
The only thing is war is very bad for every country. It kills the people. It ruins all the things in the country, and it's not good. It's better to people.
And the Canadian Embassy has offered to evacuate some of its citizens and some of the relatives of its citizens out of Iran and into Canada.
It's just so uncertain. Like right now there's a ceasefire, but we don't know how long that will last.
Israel is intensifying its massacre in Gaza. At least 62 people have been killed, 9 of them while trying to reach aid distribution points. And Thursday marks a month since a private American company backed by the US and Israeli governments began controlling food distribution to Gaza's more than 2 million residents. Since then, more than 550 starving Palestinians have been killed while trying to reach the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's collection points. The UN's humanitarian agency says in just 2 months, the number of daily meal distributions has fallen by 83%. Our correspondent Ashraf Shannon joins us live now from Gaza City. And Ashraf, it seems now that Israel has stopped its strikes against Iran, those attacks have been intensified in the Gaza Strip.
Exactly, Yashnian. On Tuesday, Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has said that Israel needed to take care of the wounded, especially the wounded, and some medical and surgical supplies. Of course, even the WHO itself said that this first aid shipment of medicines is just a drop in the ocean for the huge needs of hospitals and the health sector in Gaza. We all know that since the beginning of the
in Gaza City, when the students tried to flee in panic after hearing the blast, some of them jumped from the first floor of the building. The country has announced 3 days of national mourning. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says he had a very constructive meeting with the US President on the sidelines of the NATO humanitarian crisis and promoting peace between Russia and Ukraine. He says Donald Trump's engagement with these challenges will help achieve lasting peace in the region.
My friend Trump and I had a productive meeting during which we discussed a wide range of issues, from our bilateral relations and NATO partnership to regional and global developments. We exchanged views about the urgent need to end the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the existence of YPG terror organization in Syria. Turkish-US relations are always strategically important. Constructive engagement with Mr. Trump has helped to build bridges of understanding on some challenging issues. We have not and will not let Gaza be forgotten. We witness Israel's systematic torture, 8 points are targeted, and the Red Cross is blocked. This genocide is a disgrace to humanity. The cries of starving children must be heard. We must say, stop to Israel. We will not accept oppression and will continue to resist. Turkey is ready to use all diplomatic means and lead international cooperation for peace. Gaza will be free. The war hasn't stopped yet. We will work to bring Russia and Ukraine together again. Our ultimate goal is to hold a meeting at the leaders' level in our country and build the longed-for peace. During our meeting, we also told for a solution, I will always come to Istanbul or Ankara. We will make the necessary arrangements and hopefully bring about this meeting as soon as possible. Both Ukraine and Russia have repeatedly shown that they trust us.
Our diplomatic correspondent Andrew Hopkins has more from the Turkish capital.
Elsewhere in this conversation, President Erdogan actually did say that at the moment the situation between the two presidents seems to be so good that when either side asks for a phone conversation with the other side, that the call is returned within 24 hours. And he said that the new US ambassador here in Turkey is particularly sensitive on these issues. He's actually only been here a few months, and probably because of this situation he's been able to raise already the issue of the F-35 fighter jets. You may remember in the first Trump administration that the Turkish government was removed from that program because it bought a missile defense shield from Russia. But according to this, the Turkish president during this meeting at the NATO summit, some possibility at the moment that Turkey may be either sort of readmitted to the scheme or potentially buy some of these jets. Certainly in the past, Donald Trump has made some noises which show he's certainly to some extent sympathetic to the Turkish point of view on this. And I also think the Turkish president using his influence with Donald Trump to try and sort of bring an end to the conflict in Ukraine and also Israel's attacks in Gaza at the same time.
Just some breaking news coming into us now from Brussels. In just the last few minutes, we're hearing from EU leaders who have been meeting there, and they have now called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and the unconditional release of all hostages. They've also urging Israel to fully lift the ban, and illegal Israeli have been meeting this Thursday. One of the things they are discussing is, of course, Gaza, and now calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Well, the president of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus has criticized the European Union's move to appoint a special envoy for possible talks. It's difficult to have objective talks.
We thought that this is just undermining view to benefit the Greek citizens. So we thought that's not your business. If there's going to be any process that will lead to serious negotiations again, this is something to be conducted by the United Nations, not the European Union.
Thursday, among dignity and cooperation among member nations. The anniversary comes at a time when global security is at an all-time low.
Danny Danon, Israel's ambassador to the UN.
For an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. This is a deed to our land.
Danon's performance leads credence to the charge that the UN Charter is just parchment and ink. Some argue the war on Gaza has driven the final nail into the coffin of the already questionable and extremely volatile rules-based global order. Israel has made eradicating the UN a project, with its operations banned or restricted and dozens of its staffers killed. The only body with any leverage in the UN is the Security Council, but its 5 permanent members in the aftermath of World War II. Recent history has shown it has never been more challenged.
We are witnessing the highest number of armed conflicts since the end of the Second World War. And these are marked by rising identity-based violence, widespread violations of international humanitarian law and human rights law, and deepening impunity.
UN officials themselves aspire for change. However, they know their hands are tied, as a handful of member states hold on to most of its powers.
We can try and put that to member states, but eventually member states are the decision makers on mandates and on very much else that the UN80 initiative brings. So the Secretary General has a margin of decision making. He can do a certain number of things on his own authority, but for the most part, member states will decide where this thing goes. And that's how it should be in a democratic, member state-driven organization such as the United Nations.
But it's only the powerful member states who continue to get their way. That's weakening the legitimacy of the UN as a force to prevent war and promote human rights across the world. Bassam Bouneni, TRT World.
Let's discuss this now with Mukesh Kapila in Geneva. He was a special advisor to the UN Special. Thanks, Gated. How effective do you feel the organization has been in fulfilling its mandate?
Well, if you take an 80-year-long view, then actually the UN was highly effective in the first part of its life. Many post-colonial wars were diffused. New nations were ushered into the world, and I think many building and peacekeeping, because the world has changed so much about the member states, and so why we are now in a completely new world where the Charter's prohibitions no longer apply. So I think for its golden age, long time ago.
What do you think a new UN should then look like, and what principles of the first charter that we have should then be used in something that is new?
I think the principles are fine in the charter. The problem is the unequal power relationships within the UN system, and not just the wrong listening to the aspiration of violence, which was get away with that. The UN has to address the underlying causes, the root causes, not just paper over them with peacekeeping forces, Security Council does intend, and disgruntlement around the world, including basic disempowerments that many communities feel, many nations feel, I think is what the UN's new mission should be about. But of course, as your story said, this depends on member states themselves playing their part, and whether or not that will happen is anybody's guess.
And is that what it really comes down to here? The member states, and then the very powerful member states would then also have the veto at the UN Security Council, which means, like we've seen Gaza after Hamas's attack on Israel, and then over the last few days, we've had Iran and Israel, and all of this was happening after the world had gone through a coronavirus pandemic. It feels like we're at a point now when the world is more dangerous and unsafe than it's been in so many years.
The world is certainly more unsafe, and it's unsafe not just because of the numbers of wars that are going on, as the Secretary General correctly has said, but also these are wars without mercy. These are wars without limits, and so they're wars without rules. Now, of course, you see, it's not the UN that fights wars. So I don't think it's right to lay on the shoulders of the UN blame the UN for the problems, or to seek solutions from the UN. It must be, of course, the behavior of UN states. Having said that, I think it's important that the bureaucracy of the UN, and I don't use the word bureaucracy in a bad way, I just mean the institutions and different capacities of the United Nations system, which is more than just a secretariat in New York. It includes a whole range of other agencies all over the world. I think they have lost the confidence of the people, we the people, the opening words of the UN Charter, because of ineffectiveness and inefficiencies in so many spheres of life, which is important to people, not just war and peace. Now, UN reform, therefore, has to be at the center of UN80 as much as the political changes that we all want to see in terms of a fairer world. I don't think, to be honest, the current UN officials are approaching the business of change with the degree of purpose and courage that is required. And without that happening, I think the peoples of the world are going to continue to lose confidence in the United Nations. And of course, the countries of the world who already have their own access to grind in different ways don't want a strong UN. And that's the dilemma we are currently facing in.
And what a dilemma it is. Professor Kapila, it's always great to get your take. Thank you so much again for speaking to us.
Thank you.
Well, in the 8 decades of its existence, the UN has expanded its peacekeeping operations to many countries, in various places. Rupert Stone has this report.
UN peacekeeping was born in the Middle East. In 1948 ended the first. In the 1990s, 11,000 peacekeepers were deployed globally. By 2014, that had risen to 130,000 before dropping more.
And the countries in which they serve, UN peacekeepers are an important symbol of the United Nations at its best. And together, they have helped improve millions of lives, protecting people, preserving peace and providing hope, rebuilding infrastructure, repairing institutions, and ensuring life-saving assistance. With their support, nations around the world have made a transition from war to peace.
There are currently around 60,000 personnel involved in 11 missions around the world. The UN's biggest operations are in Africa, including Sudan, the Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Not been so effective. Peacekeepers failed to prevent the 1994 Rwanda genocide, 1995 Srebrenica massacre, and to end the civil war in Somalia. In Lebanon, the UN mission failed to prevent an escalation of violence between Hezbollah and Israel following the Hamas attacks of October 7, 2023. Lebanon is typical of the mixed record of these missions. The future of peacekeeping is uncertain, undermined by geopolitical divides and a lack of consensus on the UN Security Council, which must approve missions. However, when the UN marked International Peacekeeping Day this year, there was a large turnout.
With more than 130 delegations attending, more than 60 delegations at ministerial level, and so many expressions of support, so many pledges that were made to support peacekeeping. The main takeaway from the Berlin meeting was that peacekeeping remains very strongly supported by member states.
UN peacekeeping has long been the first legitimate step towards ending wars, but its role in today's major conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine is uncertain. Rupert Stone, TRT World.
Turkey's defense industry has evolved from foreign dependence into a self-sufficient sector that now not only meets national needs but also emerges as a major global exporter. Naim Ungaren reports on the growing impact of Turkish defense exports.
Turkey's defense exports have risen to $7.1 billion in 2024, up from $5.5 billion the previous year, a reflection of its growing global footprint. At the forefront are advanced platforms, including combat drones, warships, and electronic warfare systems.
Has developed its industry as far as fabrication of drones is concerned. And drones will be more and more important in the future. And so also for NATO, this means an added value which must be taken into consideration.
Top exporters include Baykar Technologies with $1.8 billion, Tusash with $750 million, and Asfat at $644 million in direct foreign sales. Major buyers include NATO members, the US, Czechia, Romania, Poland, and Italy.
Italy and Turkey has been working together on defense matters for a very long time. Of course, we are long-time allies and within NATO, but even MBDA has been involved in working with the Turkish industry. We produced in the 70s and in the 80s missiles with the Turkish rocket engine. And we do look forward to improve this cooperation.
And Turkey is expanding beyond NATO. recently signing a deal with Indonesia for 40 Kaan fighter jets, Turkey's first homegrown 5th-generation fighter jet. With growing footprint in defense industry exports, Turkey now ranks 11th globally. Turkey also strengthened its presence in the world's top 100 defense industry companies. Once dependent on foreign suppliers, Turkey has now transformed into a major exporter of defense technology. In just 2 decades, this in advanced armored vehicles leading the charge. Naim Öngören,